Copy of this. And if not, I know that they will be willing to provide it for you after. Also, if you were in the room this evening and now I cannot see you anymore. Let's see. Hold on. Let me go ahead and try a different method of screen sharing here. Host is disabled participant screen sharing. So if y'all can change that setting real quickly. Okay, so I just had a message here from Troy that you do not have your script parts yet. You may not have noticed this or may not have known, but you're all going to perform this evening. So yay, this is going to be a night of many delights. So if you would please go ahead and pass those script parts out to everybody. And if you get through everybody and people need a second part, we can do that too. That would be great. I'm going to try to screen share again. All right, that worked perfectly. Okay, let's see here. All right, wonderful. Here we go. So you should be able to see that now and to hear me, and your script parts are getting passed out. Those of you who get a part that the title is main motions, just realize you're going to be first up. I've got a little cheat sheet here so I know where we're going. So if you get a sheet that's titled main motions, you're going to be one of our early speakers. So please hang on to that. All right, so one thing to remember, I don't know if your city attorney is in the room, but city attorneys have a special role. Parliamentarians have a special role, and our roles are different. So I am not an attorney. Please don't construe anything that I share with you tonight as legal advice. I can tell you what I've seen. I can tell you what people recommend, but I am not an attorney. Your attorney may have had some parliamentary training, but maybe not. Not all of them do. And I've not come across many attorneys who are also credentialed parliamentarians. So sometimes I have a friend who's a great parliamentarian, and she says, when I retire, I'm going to write a book called Everything Wrong About Parliamentary Procedure I Learned from Watching C-SPAN. And boy, there's probably somebody in your life who does this too, right? I want to yield the time back to my gentle co-counsel person. It sounds great. It's lots of fun, but it is rarely used outside of legislative bodies in that sense. So again, use your attorney for what they're good at and use your parliamentarian for what they're good at. Another thing that we need to think about, because we're operating in Texas and in local government, is the Texas Open Meetings Act. The Texas Open Meetings Act and any other Texas law, federal law, local law, all of that takes precedence over parliamentary procedure or procedural guidelines, right? So in Robert's Rules of Order, for example, it permits the use of secret ballots. But we know that the Texas Open Meetings Act does not permit secret voting. Even if there is some sort of discussion that happens in executive session, any actionable action has to come out and take place in an open meeting. So anytime that there is a conflict between parliamentary procedure or adopted rules and law, law always wins. So why would we even bother to use parliamentary procedure? Well, parliamentary procedure is really just a way for groups to get their business done, right? So even when you think you're not using parliamentary procedure, when you play a game as kids or you move around in society together, we all have these sets of rules in our heads. And we assume that everyone has a set that they've agreed to, right? That we're going to go, we're going to wait in line in order, and we're going to let people take turns, all those kinds of things. And when they get written down and codified, well, they become a set of rules. And if we adopt that set of rules, then they become our set of rules. And in a group like yours, a deliberative assembly, which is what the city council is, you're working together to make things get done, right? You have pieces of business that come before you. Now, what's a little different tonight is that probably a lot of you are here as members of committees. Committees are not deliberative assemblies. But that doesn't mean they don't use parliamentary procedure. It doesn't mean they don't have rules and they just go crazy. But what it means is that at the end of the day, a committee is subject to the group that appoints it. That's the difference, right? Your city council can make decisions that go out and get acted on. The committees just report back to the council or to the body that appointed them. So when we use parliamentary procedure, what we're really trying to get to is a more efficient meeting. People don't want to be somewhere longer than they have to be. Whoops. They don't want to feel that they have not been treated fairly, and they don't want to waste a lot of time. And so parliamentary procedure is a way for groups to agree on how they're going to get things done and to do it efficiently. So you'll see that several of the rules in Robert's Rules of Order specifically, but in many parliamentary authorities, are designed just to be efficient. So Robert's Rules of Order, that great little book, 816 pages. It's rewritten every 10 years, and right now we are in the 12th edition. So if you don't have the 12th edition, if you're working from a different edition, go ahead and donate it to your recycling bin or save it for another 30 or 40 years when you can sell it on eBay, and go get yourself the 12th edition. If you buy it from the National Association of Parliamentarians, you can even get it spiral bound, which is fabulous. Now, if you don't want to read 816 pages, no problem. There is a shorter version, the Robert's Rules of Order in Brief, and that is in the 3rd edition. Again, it just gets updated every 10 years. But it is a great little book. It takes about an hour and a half to read. And then it has a nice little section in the back with plenty of wording if you're presiding over a meeting for the first time or over something that's a little bit unfamiliar to you. Lots of the language is in there. So how do you call for things? How do you process motions and handle it? Really great little book. Available on Amazon, or again, spiral bound from the National Association of Parliamentarians. All right, so let's get started looking at some of the ideas we're going to talk about tonight. Number one, we've already addressed. Members have a right to an efficient meeting. And business comes before the members by somebody making a motion. Just because something's on an agenda doesn't mean it's going to get done or adopted, doesn't even mean it's going to get discussed. And just because somebody has an idea, same thing, right? So someone has to bring that business before the body, before the assembly. And with Roberts, that always starts with the language, I move that, or I move to. Never, 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 I so move or so moved. And here's why. So somebody has got to second that motion. Somebody's got to repeat it. That's your chair or your presiding officer, Mayor Gordon. And then at the end of the day, whatever happens, someone, Cindy Gross, is going to have to record that in the minutes. And if someone said, you know what would be great if we donated something to someone, and someone says, so moved. And then you have a bunch of discussion about it and people put their hands in the air. Do you really, really know what has been agreed to? Could you make a case that some of those people who voted didn't know what they agreed to? But if you start with, I move that we do something, they do something, whatever. I move to, and again, the action words, we do something, they do something, whatever the case may be. It's very clear. It's very specific. It can be amended. It can be written down. The chair, the presiding officer, can repeat it. The secretary can record it in the minutes. People can argue for or against it. But there is no question about what it is that the assembly is considering. I move that an action. I move to an action. All right, so those of you who have the main motion sheets, please stand up and somebody run them a microphone. And we want y'all to speak very clearly and directly into the mic so that those of us online can hear you well. There are 4 of you, maybe 4 of you who have a sheet that the title is Main Motions. So whoever has number 1 on that sheet, do you have a microphone?
Yes.
Wonderful. Let's hear your motion, please.
I move that the city staff investigate the purchase of 2 new vehicles for code enforcement and provide a written report of the council.
Beautiful. That was so clear. Thank you so much. You've set the tone for tonight. Everybody else has to be just as clear. That is so great. So this motion began with, I move that. I move that the staff do something, bring us something, whatever the case may be. So who has made motions number 2?
Adams, Johnny. I move to adopt the update to the city strategic plan.
Strategic plan. Wonderful. Very good. All right. You were up to the challenge and you were just as clear and thoughtful. Thank you for that. All right. Number 3, who's got that?
Johnny Adams.
Let's hear it.
Okay, I move that the city donate 200 to the Community 4th of July Fund.
Very good. Absolutely. Okay. So we've got another I move that. We've had an I move 2. And who has number 4?
I move to accept the 2021 comprehensive financial audit of the city.
Beautiful. Thank y'all so much. Let's give them a hand. Nice job. Very good. All right. So what do we hear most often after we hear a motion?
Second.
Beautiful, right? We've always got someone in the room who is our seconder, and we love that, right? Seconds are important. What seconds tell us is that more than one person wants to consider something. Now, there are some things in Roberts that a member can do by themselves. There aren't a lot of them, but most of the time, what we want to know is that at least 2 people want to bring something before the body and have people discuss it. And seconds are how we hear that. Sometimes we've got somebody who they think that's their job, right? They're always there to second, they're quick on it, they're loud, and you know what? They're participating. So that's great. Now, if debate begins, right, we really need a second for debate to begin, but sometimes people get carried away and the chair might recognize someone and they stand up and instead of saying second like we expected, they start speaking in debate or they have a question or whatever the case may be. So now we already know somebody made a motion and somebody else has some thoughts about discussing it. We don't need a second anymore, right? We certainly don't care if we get to the end of that discussion and someone says, well, we never got a second, we can't vote on that, right? Because we know 2 people want to discuss it. A second doesn't matter at that point. Also, it is a very common habit that the name of the seconder gets put in the minutes. But Robert says it shouldn't be in the minutes. There's no point because being a seconder doesn't have anything to do with how the main motion is written, doesn't have anything to do with how you end up voting on it necessarily. It just means that someone else wanted to entertain this motion. And the presiding officer knows that because they brought it before the body to discuss, but it doesn't need to go in the minutes. Now, if that's your habit and you as a group like it or love it, as my city council does, no harm, no foul, right? But just know it's not required, doesn't have to be there, and Robert says it shouldn't be there. And while we're on that topic, let me say, first of all, that although I love Roberts, it's not the only game in town. The American Institute of Parliamentarians uses standard code. And as we talked about, legislative bodies sometimes use Mason's manual or Jefferson's manual or other groups of parliamentary rules. So that's fine. What's good for one group isn't necessarily good for every group and makes it more important that we understand which set of rules a group is working under. All right, and as we mentioned, seconds do not indicate support for or opposition to a motion. Now, we may have a seconder who always has a face on, right? Who we know exactly what they think, but just being a seconder doesn't relay anything to the other attendees. And then also, nominations don't need to be seconded. Sometimes we get in the habit of that, right? Like someone nominates someone and then people are waiting for a second and then they don't get one. Does that person not get nominated? Well, not under Roberts. Under Roberts, nominations are kind of like amendments. They're suggestions and they don't need to be seconded. People can vote for someone who's nominated, vote against them, vote for or against a date, an amount, a location, whatever the case may be, but they don't need a second. And then what happens if someone makes a motion and there's no second at all? There's just dead silence. Well, no problem. The chair will say, there is no second, and the motion will not be considered. And as you can see here, it doesn't do anything to the motion because the motion just didn't get considered. The motion wasn't adopted. Obviously, we didn't have a majority or more voting for it. And the motion didn't fail because it wasn't considered. So that's fine, right? So we should not feel like just because something comes up, just because it's on our agenda, just because someone, makes the motion, no one has to second it. And particularly if you think it's a really bad idea, don't second it. If you want to discuss it, certainly second it, but don't feel as though you have to. And if a motion does not get a second in a meeting that you're chairing or presiding over, don't worry about it. Use this language to help make sure that everyone understands there was no second and you're moving along, and also to signal to your secretary that that's what they can put in the minutes. But no worries. All right, so let's move on to the next section. We're going to talk about how a motion gets before your assembly. So we've already heard somebody makes a motion. They say, I move that, or I move to. For almost all motions, there's a second. And then what brings this business before the assembly, before the group, is the restatement by the chair. Unfortunately, a lot of groups I see do not do this. It's kind of, I don't know, an assumption that everybody in the room can hear what's going on or that everybody kind of knows. But it is a really good technique by the chair. So first of all, when the chair restates the motion, we get to hear it again, right? So we get to think about it a little more. But also, if we've misheard it as the presiding officer and we say it wrong, it's going to get fixed right there. I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting where conversation goes on for 5 or 10 minutes and someone says, well, wait, I thought we were talking about, and they say something completely different, right? Or your conversation begins to get off kilter and people get really confused. So restatement by the chair is something that a presiding officer can use throughout debate to keep reminding the assembly what it is that they're discussing and what it is they're going to be voting on. And the chair should always restate again before they take the vote. So there is someone in this room, I think, who has a page on restatement. Actually, we have 3 individuals. One of them has a page titled Restatement and they have yellow text. One of them has a page with blue text, and one of them has the second with green text. So if those 3 people would please stand up or come to a microphone together, because we want to be sure to hear what you have to say. Let us know when we're ready, Cindy. The person with yellow can begin.
I think that's it. I think we're having to read this.
Did we find our restatement, people?
Yeah, they'll get this. Green, blue, and yellow. You're yellow, I'm blue.
How are we doing? Where's our microphone?
I have.
There we go. All right, so we're going to begin with the person who's got the yellow sheet.
Okay, Mayor, I move that. the
Okay,
city-
so but someone's going to speak after you.
Mayor,
I'm sorry, we're trying to figure out who has.
Who's got restatement with blue text on it?
okay, all right,
Councilperson Tesla is recognized.
Back to yellow.
okay. I move that the city staff research the purchase of 2 vehicles for code enforcement and provide a written report to us within 30 days.
Green.
It is
Did we-
moved and second that the city staff research the purchase of 2 new vehicles for code enforcement and provide a written report to us within 30 days. Is there any discussion?
Beautiful. Y'all give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. Nice job. So we had someone make a motion. We had someone seek recognition, which was even better. They were recognized by the chair, made their motion, got a second, and then the chair restated it. So all of us, whether we could hear the first motion well or not, got to hear what the motion was that we were going to discuss. Thank y'all so much. That was great. So again, like I say here, you can't overstate the importance of restatement. I know from time to time, my mayor or the chair of a group that I'm working with will say, it just sounds odd for me to keep saying this thing. We're not that big a group. We're, everybody can hear. But I promise you, there is someone who is checking their phone or thinking about something else, usually what they're going to say in rebuttal. And hearing that repeated helps them really stay on their game. So just try restatement a few times and see if it doesn't help in your meetings. General Robert, who wrote Robert's Rules of Order, also felt that restatement is really important. So there are a couple of quotes here in your slides. And I love this one at the bottom. It is far better to risk taxing the patience of an assembly by repeating the wording of a motion on which all may be clear than to risk taking a vote whose effect may be unclear to even a few members. And I think that's really the point. If you're in a meeting and you finish the vote and the chair says, the ayes have it, the motion is adopted, we're going to do X, and someone says, I thought we were voting on, I thought we were talking about, you've been there. Hopefully it wasn't you, but you've heard it before. So restatement, love it. Also with Robert's Rules of Order, it says that whatever the presiding officer states is the motion is what goes in the minutes. Now, not every parliamentary authority agrees with that. There are others that say whatever the motion was made, that's what goes in the minutes. But heaven help you if you have a disagreement between those two. And then there are others that say whatever the chair restates right before they take the vote. So at any rate, you do want it to be very accurate. And of course, your secretary wants to know that they've got the correct material in the minutes. There is nothing worse than someone saying, well, that's not what I said. That's not how I made the motion. And, if you don't have a recording of it, you've then got to have people vote over it, right? As to what they remembered. So being accurate and restating, super important. After the restatement by the chair, we're ready for debate. So members enter into debate and they do that before they vote for debatable motions. Not every motion is debatable, but it gives people an opportunity to speak about it. All right, now we do have, someone has slides, I believe, for debate. One person has one titled Debate and Vote. Can that person please come to a microphone and speak slowly and clearly to us? Who has debate and vote?
Hold on, Miss Lee, I'm getting the paperwork.
Yeah.
It is moved and seconded to adopt the update to the city's strategic plan. Is there any further discussion? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted, and the police department will proceed with the purchase of the equipment. The next item is.
That was beautiful. Can somebody please give that lady a round of applause? That was great. So we had a presiding officer, a chair there, who restated the motion very clearly, then asked the assembly, are you ready to discuss it? Or are you ready for the question? Now, are you ready for the question sounds really formal, but what it means is, are we ready to vote? And of course, if we're not, there are people who are going to raise their hand to debate. That chair also gave a little time for people who were kind of lagging behind or thinking about it to decide whether they were ready to vote or if they wanted to debate a little more. And when she didn't hear anybody seeking recognition, she went ahead and processed the vote. And then she was very careful to make sure that everyone knew the results of the vote. The ayes have it, the motion is adopted, and we're going to do this thing, right? So what a better way to wrap all that up. Here's what we voted on. Here's the result. Here's the action we're going to take. Very clear to those who work with or for the group and need to take the action. Very clear for the secretary to record in the minutes, and very helpful for everyone in the assembly to really remember, okay, yes, we did that. Here's what we decided. May love it, may hate it, whatever. But we all are on the same page at that point and ready to proceed to our next piece of business. All right. And so as we saw, the presiding officer's job is to help that aim of efficiency. I tend to tell my presiding officers, you can kind of do whatever you want legally, but you need to remember that all the members have equal rights to object. If they think you're not doing it right, if they think you're not doing it fairly, or if they believe that you're just not following the rules. So presiding officers create this balance, right? They want to make sure that the members are engaged. They want to take care of their right to efficiency. They want to help them get the business accomplished. They want to make sure that they feel they've been treated fairly. And at the same time, members have an obligation to participate, to be ready, and to participate in the meeting. But they also have a right to object if they feel that any of those things, efficiency, fairness, getting the business done, is not being done appropriately. And unfortunately, there are people who sometimes are reluctant to do that, right? They aren't sure of how to interrupt or object, or they're not comfortable doing it. But that's a responsibility of a member. And what do we tell kids in class, right? If you have a question, someone else probably has that question too. So please take it upon yourself as a member, not only to be prepared, but also to participate and to understand that that is a right and an obligation. Now, one thing that we do encourage presiding officers to use is what we call unanimous consent. It is a super time saver. And if your organization is generally in agreement on something, they know that you're a fair presider, it is a great way to move things along. So somebody there in that room has a sheet that is titled unanimous consent. Will that person, it's just one, please stand up and get a microphone. They're going to speak clearly and slowly so we can all hear them.
Member Hawkins has asked that the assembly take a 10-minute recess. Is there any objections to doing so? Hearing no objections, the assembly will recess for 10 minutes. Please note the time and return promptly.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you so much. So another great presider there, right? The motion is to take a 10-minute recess. Is there any objection to it? Hearing no objection, we're going to do the thing, right? So we didn't have to get a second. We didn't have debate. We didn't take a vote. We just processed it and moved along, okay? This is basically a 100% vote, right? If you're doing this for a vote that normally requires 2/3 or 3/4 or something like that. Now, I will say the things that you often have a higher vote threshold for in your meetings are things that are kind of sticky, zoning, or sometimes there are budget adoption items or that sort of thing that require a higher threshold. Generally, unanimous consent makes your city attorney and your legal counsel a little uncomfortable. So just be thoughtful about when to use it. If it's something simple, everybody seems to be in agreement, there's not really any discussion about it, great time to use unanimous consent. Approval of the minutes, all those kind of simple things that you do over and over. But if it's something a little sticky or tricky, or you feel people have some feelings about it, maybe go ahead, get the motion, the second, do the whole formal procedure, just to make people feel comfortable. Also, the thing about unanimous consent can be if a presiding officer uses it all the time, sometimes members become less likely to participate. they're like, well, they're just gonna like keep railroading us and rollovers anyway. We don't want that feeling. So we want our members to know we use unanimous consent when it's helpful to get our business done, not as a way to silence members. All right, so we tried that. Wonderful, very good. And so let's talk about what we want to do before a meeting. So we talked about members being prepared, and this is true for presiding officers as well. But when you get an agenda or you know you have a meeting date coming up, be thinking about the motions that you might want to make, right? So this helps us when we get to the meeting to already have that I move that language in our minds or in our mouths, or we may even write it down so that when we are recognized by the chair to speak, we don't spend 5 minutes kind of telling a story about what brought us to that thought. We can make some very succinct comments, just a sentence or two, and make our motion. Anything else that we want to talk about, we can talk about in debate. Now, to get to debate, you've got to have more than a motion. You've got to have your second. It is okay to ask someone to be your second. Now, let's go back to Texas Open Meetings Act, right? Texas Open Meetings Act does not want elected officials, members of boards, all that kind of thing, having discussion outside of the public eye. That's why we post the agendas and the public comes to the meetings. That does not mean that you, in my opinion, not an attorney, that you could not call someone else and say, I intend to bring a motion about donating money to the July 4th fund. I'd like you to think about being willing to second that motion. You haven't asked them to engage in discussion with you. They don't have to. They can say, sure, I'll think about it, or never, or whatever they want to say, right? All you've done is ask them to consider being the second to your motion. But it prepares them. They're not surprised by it when it comes up. It may be that you've got someone there to help second you. Okay. So just be thoughtful about that, right? Please do not leave this thinking or saying that I'm encouraging you to go and have debate with other people outside the public view and all that kind of thing. That's not what I'm saying. But you can certainly ask other people, tell them that you intend to bring a motion to do X or Y, and you'd like them to consider seconding it. Also, make sure that you have your notes for debate, right? So we know when we're in a public meeting or in any meeting, it can be sometimes nerve-wracking to think about, oh yeah, I had 3 points and now I've forgotten one of them, right? But go ahead and make your notes, be prepared. It makes you a better member, and that's better for your organization. Now, also, this is a thing that I love about Robert's Rules of Order. And again, it's not true of every parliamentary authority, but Robert says, you cannot speak against your own motion, right? And I think this is part of the efficiency idea. You don't want someone making a motion and then doing that just so that they can tear it up in debate, right? That really defeats the purpose. If they were against the motion, they should have just let someone else make it and then speak against it in debate. But let's say that you're hearing things that make you change your mind about what a great idea you thought it was. You can certainly vote against it. And you can even tell people that you're going to vote against it, right? So let's hear, we have a couple of people here. We have one person who has a sheet, oh no, we have two people who have a sheet that is titled, I changed my mind. One of those people has yellow highlighter and one has blue. Unfortunately, the person with blue doesn't have much to say, but the yellow person.
Mayor, I apologize for making this.
So somebody speaks in between your two speeches. Who's got the blue sheet?
No, you said the mayor, now it's his turn.
Councilperson Newton is recognized.
Okay, now I apologize.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I apologize for making this motion. I have heard everyone's debate and will be voting against the motion. If it is defeated, I intend to move a new motion with a different solution to this issue.
Nice job. Thank y'all so much. That is great. So we have somebody who has made a motion. They've heard enough to change their mind about it. They're not bashing the motion, but they are making it clear that they are going to vote against it. And if it is defeated, they're going to bring another option. Now, the rest of us may not trust them after they brought us one bad idea, but who knows, right? the conversation may have gone in a way that we all think some other solution might be better. We might be able to get there by amendment, but we might not. And so this is a way for that maker of the motion to signal to everybody they're going to do something else. And this is something to think about. We're going to talk about in just a moment about withdrawing a motion. So if Cindy, if you want to go ahead, there are two parts for withdrawing a motion. One has yellow, one has blue. So while she does that, let's talk about until the chair restates the motion belongs to the person who made it, okay? Once the chair restates it, then it belongs to the assembly. So we're going to hear a little script now. We're going to take turns, right? Yellow, blue, for the two people who have the title withdraw. If y'all will speak slowly and clearly for us.
Mayor. 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 Mayor.
Somebody have a sheet with withdraw and blue on it?
Councilperson Newton is recognized.
I would like to withdraw this motion.
A motion that has been seconded and restated by the chair belongs to the assembly, not to the maker of the motion. That said, is there any objection to allowing the motion to be withdrawn? Hearing no objection, the motion is withdrawn. It will not be considered. The next item of business is.
Beautiful. All right. So we got several things there. Very good. So a maker of a motion decided to withdraw it or requested to withdraw it. And it was after restatement. So it wasn't just the maker's choice anymore. It was the assembly's choice. And so the presiding officer recognized that and also felt there probably wasn't going to be much dissension. So they decided to use unanimous consent, our old friend there. And they said, is there any objection to allowing the motion to be withdrawn? They paused and gave the members an opportunity to object and then said, hearing no objection, the motion is withdrawn and will not be considered. Beautiful, super simple. Now, I will also say that withdrawn motions in Roberts are not required to be put in the minutes. However, I encourage it because someone's going to remember that that came up, and that's the same person who's going to forget that it got withdrawn, and then they're going to think it got left out of the minutes, right? So I like to put it in there for my council. We don't have a lot of motions that are withdrawn, but when we do, just as a note, the motion was made and seconded, and then the motion was withdrawn without objection, and then go on to the next business, right? Just provides a way for that clarity to make it into the minutes. Your choice. All right, let's see here. There we go. So we tried both versions of that. And now, if you guys aren't asleep yet, here come amendments. Everybody needs to stand up and do some jumping jacks first. All right. Amendments trip people up, but not for any good reasons. I think they just trip people up because they don't do them a lot. And so they feel a funny way about them. But all they are edits, right? So if you were writing a paper, you'd write out a sentence and then you'd edit it if you wanted to change it. And that's what amendments are. We've said that we're going to make a motion that we could write down so that everybody could understand what it is that we're voting on. A motion that we could write down so it can go in the minutes. Well, same thing. If we have that nice, clearly written, clearly spoken motion, then we can definitely say what it is that we would like to change about it, take out of it, add to it, replace it with. And that's what amendments are. So let's go through some options for amendments. An amendment is a motion to modify the wording and within certain limits, the meaning of a pending motion before the pending motion itself is acted upon. All right, in English, we are making a motion to change the wording of the motion that is before us. That's what amending is. Sometimes, you know how it is, when you change the wording, you can change the meaning. And that's certainly something that can be used very craftily in amendments. But at the end of the day, what we don't want to happen is someone saying, you know, I like this idea, but I'd like to change it a little because I think that the last time we gave money to this group, something happened and then we weren't very happy, and on and on and on, right? That is not editing. It may be useful, may be helpful, may be interesting in debate, but it is not something that you could write down. And so the chair at that point would say, what is your motion? What is your amendment? How can we help you to craft the wording that you want to see? Amendment is about the actual words in play, okay? So let's say I move that we buy 2 police cars. We are not going to talk about, the amendment is I move that we strike 2 and insert 3. So our chair, we get a second, and our chair is going to say, the amendment is to strike 2 and insert 3. If adopted, the main motion will be to buy 3 police cars. What is not going to happen next is we are not going to talk about an officer that we don't like at the department, or how much it costs to put a light bar on, or on and on and on, right? We're going to talk about why 2 cars is better than 3 cars. Now, can some of that stuff come up in there? Yeah. I mean, your presiding officer is going to have to help the organization decide what is really appropriate in that discussion and what isn't. But each time that the chair restates, the motion is on amending the main motion to strike 2 and insert 3, it should bring us back. Oh, right. Okay. We're not fighting over just the purchase. We're not fighting over what happened last year. We're talking about debating 2 versus 3. What's relevant to that? Now, I made a little note here at the bottom. You know, there is such a thing as substitution, and substitution is you can take this whole motion and put another whole motion in. And you can get, you know, sort of far off on that. That does not happen all that often. You do see it, you know, like at legislative sessions. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on it here, but just be aware that is an animal that's out there. When you make amendments, they need to be germane, which just means they have to pertain to the thing that you're dealing with, right? If we're talking about 3 police cars versus 2 police cars, we're not going to relitigate what happened the last time the fire department bought a fire truck. Also to remember is that we can have primary amendments and secondary amendments, but we can't keep going. We've got to come back. So I move that we strike 2 and insert 3. We've got a primary amendment. I move that we strike 3 and insert 4. We've got a secondary amendment. We're not going to make any more changes to that until we vote on those and start coming back down the ladder. That's a good way to think of it, as a ladder. Only primary and secondary, because you can imagine, right, how crazy that conversation could get if you kept changing things on and on. And that's also why we have to keep things germane, so that we don't have an amendment about how many to buy, and then an amendment about who to buy them from, and then an amendment about when we're going to buy them, right? We've got to deal with the question of how many, then we can come back and talk about when, then we can come back and talk about who we're buying from, that sort of thing. So as a presiding officer, and even as a member, helping the assembly to stay on track with that will make your conversation and your debate much more smooth. Very briefly, these are the main ways to amend. So if you insert, of course, you're putting things in between other words, or you can also add. So for example, I move that we buy 2 police cars. You might want to insert new. If you move that we buy 2 police cars from Fiddlesticks Ford, right? That would be an add at the end. And so this is typically done for words within a motion, but it might be that you have an ordinance or a resolution or a contract before you, and it may happen with a paragraph or with a larger section. In Roman numeral 2, we're talking about striking out things. So sometimes we want to strike out words. Sometimes we want to strike out paragraphs or sections or that sort of thing. That's fine too. Then we can combine these. We could strike out and insert. So for example, we could take different words, strike them out, and put new words in that place. Or we could take those words and just put them in a different place. And remember, we're doing this on something that we can edit. We're affecting the words, but we do realize that sometimes affecting the words also affects the meaning. So just, when you play with that, that can be a strategic thing, can also be a disaster. So be very careful. And then at the bottom, of course, we also touch on substitution. So let's work through some of these a little bit with some examples that we might use. So for example, we've heard this motion. I move that staff investigate the purchase of 2 new vehicles for code enforcement and provide a written report to the council. The first thing to think about with amendment is there anything in here that is variable? Well, sure, right? Maybe we don't want staff to investigate, we want someone else. Maybe we don't want 2, we want 3. Maybe we don't want new, we want used. Maybe we don't want things for code enforcement, we want them for someone else. Maybe we want an oral report or slideshow or a white paper, right? Executive summary. So for amendment, first of all, we have to make sure that there are things that could be changed that are editable. Inserting words. Well, here we go. The staff might need to investigate the purchase of 2 new blue vehicles for code enforcement. Okay, we're inserting blue between other words. How about adding words at the end? Well, same motion, but we want that report within 30 days. Added that on to the end. Perfectly good amendment. Striking words. Well, maybe we don't want new vehicles. Maybe we don't want to say what kind of vehicles we want. Maybe we're open to new or used, or maybe we're going to come back and fix that later. Striking and inserting. Okay, so we said we had 2 options for this. What if in the same place in our phrase or our document, we wanted to put in different words? And you can see that here, we're striking code enforcement, and in that same place, we're putting different words, building inspections. Now we might want to take the words and just put them in a different place, right? Now, this amendment here doesn't really make, I have to say, it doesn't make a lot of sense because it doesn't change what we're talking about. But do look at some of the motions that you work with in your bodies, in your assemblies, and think about, if I took those words and put them somewhere else, does that affect something? Does that change the meaning? Does that accomplish something that I want to do? If so, perfectly allowable under Roberts. All right, so we've just addled you up with all the amendments. We're going to move on to something a little more straightforward and familiar, I hope, to you. Minutes. All right, now, how have many of you have ever said, well, I can't approve those minutes, I wasn't there? Raise your hand if you've done it. Some people have done it, right? It doesn't matter. The minutes belong to the body that you're on, whether that's the council or committee, whoever is considering the minutes. And what you're trying to do is to approve the most correct version of the minutes. If you don't have a correction, then you have no reason to oppose approving them, right? You might as well approve them unless you know there's something wrong with them, is basically what we're saying. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't find out later that something's incorrect, and Roberts certainly allows for that. A group can have their minutes brought back to them years later to make a correction if they believe that it needs to be corrected. Now, not that they change their mind about revisionist history or whatever the case may be, but if they really say, oh my gosh, we found a recording of the meeting, the vote didn't go that way, and we missed it when we approved the minutes, whatever the case may be. Even years later, that group, now composed of completely different members, can make that correction. Now, again, if it's more than a meeting or 2 in the past, Roberts really encourages you to to put a lot of notes in those minutes about why that change is made. So you can see what was there originally and you can see what the change was. It's not as though Roberts is saying, go back and just fix, whatever you didn't like about what that group did in the past. But just know that even though you're approving minutes for a meeting that you didn't attend, that doesn't mean if something comes up later that it can't be fixed. And I think that's the thing that makes most people really concerned about approving minutes for a meeting that they weren't at or that they don't remember well. But again, if you don't have a correction, you might as well approve them. Now, the other thing about minutes is that they should be pretty succinct. They are not a history book. They are not a history lesson. They are not a recording or a transcript. Minutes should contain what was done. What was the motion made? What was the vote? What was the action that was taken or will be taken? Not what was said, not what people thought. Please, please don't put your secretary in the position of having to understand your meaning about debate and putting that into the minutes. It's not where it belongs, in my opinion, in Robert's opinion. Now, certain organizations get in the habit of putting some additional stuff in their minutes. And if that's the case, if that makes your organization feel better, if a speech or something like that, provide it in writing and let that be attached to the minutes. Okay, but don't ask your secretary to sort of interpret people's comments to each other in debate and that sort of thing. Really not appropriate for the minutes. And again, we're coming back to Roberts 4111. The only proper way to object to the approval of the draft is to offer a correction. Okay, if you don't have a correction, you might as well approve them. Now, the caveat here at the bottom is it may be that you know that the minutes that you're being asked to approve are a total mess, right? Maybe the secretary said, I lost the recording, I was in a car accident and I can't remember what happened, and I've got some minutes that are really, really just bare bones, right? So it may be that that group wants to spend some time getting those more correct or more fleshed out, and that's fine. You can also use what's called a minutes approval committee. So the chair could appoint a small group, a subset of the group, to review the minutes and work with the secretary to get them to a place where they feel that they are more accurate. So again, no reason not to approve unless you have a correction. But obviously, if there's something really, really wrong with them, there are ways to deal with that as well. All right, so let's talk about some techniques that we can use. Obviously, you have very tough issues to discuss. Sometimes it's things that people are very divided on, or that there's just not enough money to solve. And that's true at every level of government in the country. But we always want to make sure that what we're discussing is the motion and not the people who make the motion or who engage in debate. And sometimes in some meetings with some people, that's very hard to remember, but it's very, very important. Another thing that we need to remember when we chair a meeting or preside over a meeting is that motions may be out of order, but people, except in really dire circumstances, people are not out of order. So being very careful about our language is important. The motion is not in order at this time. We'll be happy to entertain it when it is, whatever the case may be. But unless someone's behavior is truly bad, we don't say you are out of order. Now, certainly, if someone is cursing at someone else or saying really awful things about people, right? That person might be out of order, and there are provisions for that in Roberts. But 9 times out of 10, it's simply that someone has made a motion that is not in order. Someone may have raised a point of order to remind the chair of that. And so we need to be careful about not saying, Mr. Smith is not in order. No, it's Mr. Smith's motion is not in order. That motion is out of order at this time. And then along with that, referring to each other with titles and respect and not using first names. And that's hard in a lot of communities or a lot of committees because we know each other. We might have worked with each other for years and years, and we might be working on things we're really passionate about. but keeping that level of formality in a meeting can be really nice. It can help us think more about the issue that we're dealing with and not get so caught up in, well, you know, last year you voted against something that I really liked and I'm going to take your motion down now, right? Because that doesn't help our organizations, it doesn't help our community, and that's not why we showed up in the first place. So keeping that little level of formality, and chairs, presiding officers, y'all can go a long way to helping that, reminding each other that we refer to each other by titles, not first names. And then again, thinking about formality. Robert says that if you're in a group, a board of about a dozen or less, you can act a little informally. Now, my city council has 9 members on it, and my mayor can take that up or down. And that's probably true in the groups that you're in as well. If there's something that people have a lot of feelings about, maybe a lot of members of the public showed up, it might be that that night he's much more careful to make sure that people are recognized before speaking, that they're speaking to each other with titles, those kinds of things, that we're taking little pauses to make sure that things are processed properly. Whereas in another time where they're discussing things that most people agree about, the conversation's very genial, it might be much more informal. And it is fine. Don't feel like, as a presiding officer, just know that it is fine for you to take that level up or down as you need to, even within the same meeting. And your members should understand that and welcome it. Thinking about meeting procedure technique as well, a great technique is to slow everything down. You know how it is when people get excited, they get passionate, they're waiting to say their part, they're hearing somebody else say something they really want to speak about. But it is fine as a presiding officer to simply pause, to stop and speak to your secretary, your attorney, your city administrator, city manager, to simply look down at your paperwork for a moment before you recognize the next speaker. These are all ways that help other people unconsciously come down a little. Everybody takes a breath. Everybody takes a beat. Another thing that you can use is called stand at ease. So stand at ease is just an informal version of recess. But if you ask your members to stand at ease, you don't expect them to leave the dais. You don't expect them to go take a phone call or go to the bathroom the way you would with recess. Recess, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, you're not surprised when people get up and leave the room or go and talk to each other. They might spend a little time trying to convince somebody to think about their perspective on an issue. But stand at ease keeps everyone there and gives you, as the presiding officer, a little time to get your thoughts in order, to ask a question of your attorney, to find something in your documents, or just to let everybody breathe, right? So try using that. You don't even have to tell them you're using it. You know, just start looking down more, waiting before you recognize people. There are a few people that'll irritate, right? And when things are busy and exciting, people may be just chomping at the bit to speak. But helping them slow down is going to help your whole meeting procedure. So I encourage you to try it. Another thing to remember is when you're taking votes, to always take both sides of a vote, even if you know it's unanimous, or even if you know that almost everybody has voted in favor of it. People can change their vote up to the time that the vote result is announced. So it doesn't happen necessarily a lot, but you always want all those in favor, say aye, all those opposed, say no. You give people the chance. Now, what we don't want to say is the same thing for both sides, right? We want to give the aye, the no, yes, no, whatever the case may be. And here's why. Let's imagine, oops, sorry, let's go back one slide. Okay, so let's say all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, same sign. So they say aye. And then you say, the ayes have it. How do you know? You haven't given people 2 different signals to give to you, right? If you want to see a group of people get angry, just try that on them. And then be sure to always announce the result. And we have a really simple 4-part form for that that you heard in the speeches earlier. The ayes have it or the noes have it. The motion is adopted or the motion is not adopted. We're going to buy 3 police cars. We're not going to buy any police cars. And then the next item of business is, right? So this is a great recap. The ayes have it or they don't. The motion was adopted or it wasn't. Something's going to happen or not. And now we're going to this other thing. It's a great mental stop for people. It helps them process and sort of get closure around the item they've been discussing and then prepare to move on to the next item. And they know what the next item is. All right, so let's try this a little more. Suspend the rules. So suspend the rules, I think, kind of gets, I won't say a bad rap, but sometimes people think they can suspend everything. Not the case. First of all, you can only suspend rules that you could have made in the first place. So let's think about it for a city. A city cannot suspend rules that are created by the Texas legislature or the federal government, right? And they can't suspend anything in their charter because that's voted on by the public. That's not up to just the city council. So being very thoughtful about when suspend the rules can be used. Any rules that the council or the group that you're in could have adopted, generally they can suspend, not all of them, but most of them. So most of the things in parliamentary procedure, most of the things, if you have your own adopted rules, that kind of thing, can be suspended. But it takes a 2/3 vote because generally what you're doing is changing the rights of one of your members, right? So if you decide, for example, to suspend the rules about, I don't know. Let's say you want to change the length of debate for an item, not even for a whole meeting, but just for an item. You could use limit or extend the limits of debate and say tonight everyone's going to be allowed to speak 3 times on each item instead of 2 times on each item, right? So we think, well, that's more generous, right? But it is a change in people's rights. And so for that to happen, you do need a vote threshold of 2/3. So just being careful and thoughtful about using suspend the rules. Here we go. Only for rules you have power over, can't suspend law, can't suspend your city charter provisions unless the charter specifically provides for it. And then you need a second and a 2/3 vote in the affirmative to adopt it. So for that third bullet there, in a city that I was in before, their charter provisions voted on by the public did include, they had a 2-reading rule. And the 2-reading rule could be suspended if there was a 2/3 vote for it. Only for that item, right? Like they had to suspend it every time they wanted to invoke that provision. But it was specifically laid out in their charter. And that was the only way that they could suspend that provision. They could not go around suspending other parts of the charter. So just being very careful about that. All right. And so then thinking about as well, when people have the right to speak in your meetings. So for the most part, your chair, your presiding officer is the one who's going to govern when other people speak. They will recognize them and give them the floor. There are a few interrupting motions, right? Like point of order. People might raise a question of privilege. They might call for the orders of the day. But in most part, they need to let the chair know they want to speak and wait to be recognized. The chair announces new business. They recognize the members in order to speak. But a member might, for example, stand up and say, Mayor, Chair, Mr. President, whatever the case may be for their organization, to let them know they are seeking recognition. When you make motions, think about making motions with positive, active language. Not only to be positive, but because you don't want to end up with a motion full of negatives, double negatives, it confuses people. I move that we don't support the thing that didn't support us, whatever the case may be, right? There's got to be a better way to word our motion. And the other thing that we need to remember as well is that motions that if we adopted them are the same as doing nothing at all. those are not in order, right? So let's say that we have an item before a body, and so someone doesn't like it, right, to adopt an ordinance. I move that we don't adopt this ordinance. Well, that's just the same as not doing anything at all, right? The active thing would be to adopt the ordinance. So why make a motion to not adopt it? If you don't get a motion, it doesn't get adopted. If someone else makes that motion, you can always encourage people to vote against it. But you shouldn't start out with a motion to not do the thing. It's the same as doing nothing at all, and it's wasting the assembly's time. Now, do remember here, as a chair, as a presiding officer, that you can help people get their motions right. You can refer them to your parliamentarian. If your city secretary or city attorney can help people word a motion, just asking them, what's the outcome that you're trying to get to? And how can we word that, right? It's perfectly all right to help people get their motion put together and before they make the motion. And that helps so that you don't have to amend it so much later, generally. You can stand at ease and have someone work with another member, anything like that to help make things more efficient and clearer for the members. Some last notes to think about, and then we have a few more scripts, so don't think you're going anywhere. First of all, parliamentary procedure should not be a weapon, and it's not designed to show off, right? So the person who comes to your meeting and every motion, they're like, oh, that's out of order because you didn't move it in the third person, blah, 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 or they're quick to bash everybody for not doing it right. They're not using parliamentary procedure right? At the end of the day, you should almost not notice it because it's simply people making the motion to do the thing and then other people entering in debate, votes happening, all that kind of stuff. It should be very smooth and natural. But if people are using it to silence other members or make them feel like they're not good enough and they're not doing it right, that's inappropriate. Not a good use of parliamentary procedure. Also, remembering that parliamentary procedure is about the rights of members, even when they're absent, okay? That's why we give notice. That's why sometimes there are requirements, well, quorum requirements, first of all, that we know that the assembly or the group is being representative of the whole body. Everybody can't be there maybe, and that's okay, but we do need to have enough people there. We need to know that the people who weren't there were aware the meeting was going to occur, all those sorts of things. Robert's Rules of Order in particular is very concerned about minorities around 30%, right? Around 1/3, because that's a group that's big enough that might convince some other people on majority votes to vote with them. And so there's a lot of discussion in Roberts about being very thoughtful when the minority opinion approaches 1/3. And of course, that's the part of having to get 2/3 to suspend the rules or extend the limits of debate, change the limits of debate, because again, that's that group that's approaching the majority threshold. The chair makes rulings, not the parliamentarian. Please do not ask your parliamentarian, your attorney, your city secretary to say that what someone else did or didn't do was right or wrong. That's not their job. That's the job of the chair. You've chosen the chair to lead your meetings, to lead your assembly's members. That's their job to make rulings. They don't have to make rulings very often, but let's imagine that point of order comes up and they say, no, that motion is not in order. Well, they've made a ruling. That ruling should go in the minutes because it sets precedent. And again, a member can appeal that ruling. They're going to have to get a second, and there's a procedure for it. They still have a right as a member to appeal that. But that is the chair. That is the member of the organization. Don't put rulings onto people who are not members. All right, now we have some more scripts. Cindy, if you guys are up to it, I'd like to do a couple more, and then we can open it up for questions. How does that sound? So we've got, let's see here. There are two people who might have a page titled Parliamentary Inquiry. One of them will be in yellow, one of them will be in blue. And there she goes.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair,
Member Board is recognized.
a Parliament inquiry, please.
The member will state the inquiry.
Is it in order at this time to move to adjourn?
Very nice. Good job. Thanks, you guys. Okay, now this was very formal, wasn't it? Right? We had a member requesting recognition. The chair recognized them. They said a parliamentary inquiry. Then the chair said, state your inquiry. And then the person asked their question. Now that's probably a lot more formal than we're going to see in a lot of the meetings we're in. But even if you're not so formal, you may follow a similar procedure. What the member didn't do when they were recognized by the chair is they didn't just start talking and asking all their stuff and doing all their things. They said to the chair, I have a parliamentary inquiry. What they mean is, I have a question about what's okay under the rules right now, right? They could have said it in a lot of different ways and it would be fine. And the chair, realizing what the purpose was that they wanted to speak for, said, okay, what's your question? And then the person asked the question. Again, this is a really great level of formality to keep everybody kind of listening, calm, participating, that sort of thing. You certainly don't have to use language this formal, but thinking about that, seeking recognition, giving recognition, telling the chair the reason that you asked for recognition, the chair saying, okay, please go ahead, and then asking your question. Another thing to think about is the conversation of members or those who are presenting should always go to or through the chair. So I'm sure we've all been at meetings where people begin to talk to each other across the dais, right? Well, you know what you don't understand, I've got this thing over here. Well, you know what we did, blah, blah, blah. And the next thing you know, nobody's looked at the chair in 5 minutes. But every one of those people should have directed their attention to the chair as they made their comments. Keeps things calm, leaves the chair in charge. So if you're presiding over a meeting and you're seeing things get very conversational and crosstalk across the dais, put a stop to that. Remind your members, please wait for recognition. I'll call on you in a moment. You know, whatever is appropriate for the level of formality or informality in your organization. All right, so that was about parliamentary inquiry. Let's try one for a point of order, and we're going to need 3 people for this. Yellow, green, and blue for point of order.
Hold on 1 second.
You're doing great. Thank you so much for this.
Who hasn't participated yet? Let me see.
Who's the next victim? That's why you got out of the house tonight to come do this. And speak loudly and slowly and clearly for us, please.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair.
Member is recognized.
I move that employees and officers of the city no longer pay local property taxes.
Blue.
The member will state his or her point.
Where's our blue? Who's got blue?
Point of order.
I'm not sure The member will state his or her point.
Blue?
This motion is not a legal action that the assembly may adopt to take.
Green?
Member Boza raises a point of order that the assembly does not have the authority to adopt this motion. The chair is in agreement and the motion is out of order.
Very good. Nice job. Okay, great. So we had a member make a motion that employees and officers of the city no longer pay property taxes. Oh, sounds good. But another member said, point of order, right? They were like, wait a second, the rules are being broken here. But they didn't start into a diatribe about it. They waited for the chair to recognize them, which the chair did. State your point, state his or her point. And they said, you know, that's out of order. We can't do that. It's illegal. And the chair recognized this. They said they raise a point of order that this is, the assembly does not have the authority to do this. The chair is in agreement. The motion is out of order. So like we talked about earlier, it's not that the member's out of order, the motion is out of order. The chair made that ruling. They could have asked for some advice from someone if they wanted to, but ultimately they made the ruling. All right, great job. Very good. So, all right, let's take some questions if anybody has any, and then we do have a few more scripts if anyone wants to do any more script work. Do we have any questions?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Gabriel.
Yes, I've experienced. Well, let's just say, what if the chair is the one who makes the rules, asks any of the commissioners if they have questions, and then the chair is the one interrupting, kind of breaking the lines of civility himself or herself.
Yeah, so that can be really difficult. And that's when a parliamentarian hears from a group because they've gotten into a spot they can't get out of. But there are several things that you can do before things get really dire. I would say the first thing would be, to encourage one or more members of the group to have a conversation with the chair offline. And to say, we all want to participate fairly. We really appreciate your guidance as being the chair. We know that's a difficult position, but I'm concerned that I'm not being heard, or I'm concerned that another member is not being fairly treated, that sort of thing. Within a meeting, it is a little more challenging. Obviously, if things are horrible, there is a motion in Roberts whereby a member can basically stand up and begin a voting process to replace the chair. Now, that is generally even more difficult in something like some of the groups that we're involved in, because there may be, for example, in a city charter, or in a planning and zoning commission, a set of bylaws, there may be other documents that say a particular person is going to chair all the meetings, right? It's not as though that group just got together and elected the president. So it kind of also depends what sort of organization you're in as to whether that is viable or not. I think another thing that a group can do is really just use simple things like body language and tone of voice, behavior, that sort of stuff, to set a norm for a group. For example, if a chair is being interrupted, then a member could raise a point of order very calmly, maybe, in a lower register, to help take some of that passion out of the discussion. I believe the member was not finished speaking. I believe it's inappropriate for someone to interrupt the member before they finish their comments. When that debate finishes, the chair and whoever was speaking, maybe another member would seek the floor to ask that not be repeated, sort of some interpersonal ways. So really, depending on the group you're in and what other laws or documents govern it, it can be a little challenging, but I would encourage you to kind of take several different routes to think about, maybe why does the chair act that way? Are they nervous about presiding? Are they passionate about a topic? Are they letting interpersonal things come into a meeting? There may be several reasons why that happens. The other thing I would say is that in parliamentary procedure, there is a very, very big emphasis on the chair being as impartial as possible. The chair should not enter in debate. The chair should almost never vote. And these are some ideas that we don't see often in local government and local government committees and boards and those kinds of things. I think because we feel that it's representative government and we expect people that we vote for to go and actively represent us. But that is something that a chair or presider could try. They could maybe always be the last to speak, or they could try not to speak for one side or another, but simply to recap the arguments they hear, that kind of thing. So again, depending on what type of group and what type of constituency they're representing, you may have some opportunities there as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have a question? Anyone else online? Troy? Not that I see.
Okay. I think we've gone a little bit over your time. I think you had asked me to hold that at an hour, and we've gone a little over that. But please know, Cindy and Troy have my contact information. If I can be of help to you, please let me know. I'd love to talk to you or put you in contact with parliamentary groups or parliamentarians in your area. And I hope that you all have wonderful meetings.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Presentation. Just 1 second. Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem Miles, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, that thing's been fighting me over there.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Ready?
Hi, I just want to say, and Cindy, thank you for allowing me to speak. I just want to say this was an excellent training session. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it was needed, and kudos to the Office of the Secretary for putting this together. So thank you, Ms. Gross and Ms. Choi for putting this together. And hopefully all the volunteers enjoyed the session as well as I did. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Reed?
I just want to thank you guys for doing a great job. Ms. Lee, it was incredible. This is something that, especially in a new council member, I feel like we needed this a long time ago. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us this evening.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I want to say thank you to staff, to Cindy, to Ms. Lee, everybody, the volunteers for coming out and putting in your time and effort. I used to be on the Board of Adjustment, so I know it is, it does something to try to do what you can for the city. And yes, I did have this on the second, when I first got elected, we did have a partial training, but it wasn't as in-depth as this. So I appreciate to have a refresher and take this book at home and to keep on learning more that I can. Thank you.
Ms. Lee, kudos, an excellent job. I always learn, even if I've heard it before, it's always new when it comes from you. I like that. Thank you so very much, and everyone that was in attendance, either online or in person, thank you so much. This is like the intro to some other training that will be coming along. And I want to give kudos to the staff, thank you so much, and to the room that has the AV, yeah. Thank you, your hands in your hands, Mr. Gibson. Thank you very much, we appreciate that. Staff, we appreciate you for that. Thank you so much for everything, and there's nothing more that I can say, except God bless and have a good night.
Again, thank you volunteers for coming out.
Absolutely. Thank you, volunteers, for the job that you do.
Hi, everyone. Just one last thing before you go. Again, thank you guys for participating. I think this went incredibly well, and thank you guys for participating in the skits. That was awesome. But before you leave, if you have not signed in our sign-in sheet up front, please make sure to do so. This will allow us to go ahead and print off your certificates, and we will give them to your,
Board secretary.
your board secretary, so they can pass them to you during your session. So if you're on multiple boards, you just get one. So just heads up on that. So again, if you haven't signed in, please make sure to do so. Again, there's plenty of food, take as much as you need home, because we don't want to take it home, all right? But I'll let Miss Cindy say the final word.
Again, thank you, Ms. Lee, and I just want to give a shout out, she's our president of our TMCP program this year. And she has really done a good job.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Again,
Good to be in a group with Cindy.
huh?
Good to be in a group with Cindy.
Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.